Welcome back. Now it's time for our weekly U.S. election tracker update with our contributor, Wyatt Sharpe. Today, he'll be speaking to Bruce Heyman, a former United States ambassador to Canada.
I'm joined now by the former U.S. ambassador to Canada, Bruce Heyman. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
You as well. Perhaps let's just start out with what obviously took place on Saturday. I mean, it's obviously very tragic in many regards, but to a certain degree, it also has people talking as it relates to what it means for politicians in North America as a whole and their safety level. Even right now with the Republican National Convention, the director of the Secret Service is facing a lot of questions. What, from your perspective, do you think needs to be done just to ensure that politicians don't need to have this fear and can actually focus on the governing aspect?
Wyatt, let's just first start and talk about how tragic it was for the loss of life that occurred and how scary it is to know that politicians are targets of people using guns and trying to eliminate them and eliminate their voice and presence. I have a lot of disagreement with Donald Trump on policy, but never do I want to do anything other than to beat him in the ballot box. Bullets are never the answer. We have a gun violence problem in our country overall. We've seen that in our cities. We've seen that in mass shootings. Now we've seen it targeted toward a presidential candidate. I think the Secret Service has to button up. Clearly, there will be investigations as to what happened and why it happened. But there were gaps that appear even to the casual observer, not even the most sophisticated. And we're going to have to close those. And we're going to have to figure out what happened, why it happened, and make sure it never happens again. This is an unfortunate aspect of being in America during a time period where guns are legal and even assault rifles are legal. And we've got to figure out how to deal with that. Otherwise, we'll continue to face these types of stresses, and hopefully not against politicians, but we see it in American society.
And let me ask you too, because even with the RNC happening right now, to a certain degree, it's bound to happen. But there was a lot of talk about the rhetoric, toning it down and bringing down the temperature. But just days after, the Republicans, Don Jr. was back on every television network imaginable, criticizing them. The Democrats were back out talking about abortion and Project 2025 on the campaign trail. And I mean, to a certain degree, it's still part of the news cycle, but it seems as if people have kind of already put this behind them in some aspects. It's just fascinating to me that the conversations about toning down the political rhetoric aren't being taken more seriously. Do you think it's time, or how do you think we can actually make efforts to tone down the rhetoric to prevent things like this from happening in the future? Because it's at this rate, it would seem, it's just a continuation of what was happening beforehand. And so it would only seem as if they're, not willing to make any efforts to kind of prevent it from happening.
I think President Biden addressed the nation and talked about it correctly. And I think that, each individual has to take individual responsibility. I was extraordinarily disappointed to see Donald Jr. use the kind of language that he used last night after they too had agreed that they would work on toning down the rhetoric. That wasn't anything close to toning down the rhetoric. We're in a very competitive political season in which I believe, and I do support the Democrats, but I believe that there are some existential issues that we're going to face. Democracy being one of them, but even beyond that, women's rights to choose and their own health care. The environment is going to be a key component of this upcoming election. And, I hope we can do it civilly. I mean, we can disagree without being disagreeable. Mm-hmm. But, some people just lean in on their practice behaviors, and we saw a little bit of that last night with Donald Jr.
And obviously, just to conclude here, I'm sure some of the conversations that are being had right now amongst the two ambassadors, David Cohen and Kirsten Hillman, are related to preventing that, not just in the United States, but also in Canada, and how to ensure that Canada can continue to kind of prosper in its current political environment that is relatively stable. What do you think Canada needs to do to basically prevent what's happening in the United States right now and having that kind of heightened level of political rhetoric? A lot of people would say we're kind of on the trajectory to get to where the United States is.
Yeah. Well, one point of clarification for you. A sitting U.S. ambassador is barred by law to participate in a dialogue or discussion with regard to politics. The Hatch Act prevents him from supporting individual candidates.
All right, we will leave it there. Bruce Heyman, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. Be well, everyone.